At this point, you are done your initial planning, you're done phase 0, and you've been approved to go on to phase 1 and 2, which are done simultaneously, kind of. Really, they're done in sequence, but we've grouped them together. So I'm just going to go over this document. This one should be a lot shorter because I don't have to introduce the entire assignment to you at this point. I just got to talk to you about what you're going to be doing in this phase. You know that you're building a game. You have enough rough idea of what you're doing. Basically, this document starts off again with telling you about deadlines and deductions if you miss deadlines, and excuses that mean nothing. Project breakdown. Basically, it just talks about the 4 phases again. Phase 0, you're done this, so we don't have to worry about this. Phase 1. This is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So now what's going to be happening here is you're going to be filling out a detailed game design document, or GDD. And the purpose of this document is to fully flesh out your game. You're going to be filling it out in great detail. Now some of the elements of the document you're not going to need. So for example, if your game is not multiplayer, then you wouldn't have this multiplayer component in your document, and you could just delete it from the document itself. It is a template that I've given you, and you're just going to go from that template. Everything else should be filled out in its entirety. And it is a professional level document, which means that there should be no grammar or spelling errors. It should be written in the third person. It should be cleanly formatted, which means like you shouldn't have part of a row of a table that's cut off in the middle of a page. Fix your spacing, either cut off the table early and recreate it on the next page, or add in the appropriate spacing so things look clean. It should not be poorly formatted in any way, shape, or form. It is a professional document. This would be the type of thing that you might hand into like a publisher if you were ever presenting your game to a real publisher. So, pardon me. Again, make sure that the whole document is written in third person. You should never be using I, we, or anything like that. So I'm just going to quickly go over all the different components and then show you the document itself. Well, I'll jump back and forth so you have a good idea. There are 17 components that are part of this document. It is not a small document, and as you fill it out, that's just going to make it bigger. You may think, well, that's just crazy. Well, it's not. What it is, it's thorough, and it's going to give you a good idea, and it's going to ensure that you actually have a cemented plan. You know what you're going to be building. You're not going to be playing a guessing game halfway through the project. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? No, you have a plan in mind. Now that being said, you may want to make some small changes, but by the end of the road, everything should be relatively the same to your original design. That's why you're putting all the forethought into it. So it is a big document, and fill it out in its entirety. So first thing up is a title page, and you're going to fill in all the needed data. Looking at this, you need to tell me what the title of your game is, the company name. You already filled all this out in the initial planning document. Author, who's part of the project, so who are the members of the team. Target completion date. What is the final due date of this assignment? Check with your teacher to get that information. And then we get into the elevator pitch. So you have a brief space to sell me the game. So an elevator pitch is a classical term that's used to force people to summarize their strategy and their plan, whatever it is they're trying to pitch to somebody. So can you sell the game idea to a publisher in a 60-second elevator ride? So if you got 60 seconds, what are you going to say? Now don't speed through it like you're John Machida, the world's fastest talker. Think it clearly, because if they can't understand what you're saying, then you haven't achieved anything. So boil it down to 60 seconds, a nice clean 60 seconds. How would you describe your game, and make sure that the person listening really understands what you're trying to sell them. Then some basic game details, similar to what we already talked about in the design document. What genre is your game? Circle one or tell me what other one it is. You can delete the other ones. It doesn't really matter. Get rid of the space. Number of players. Is it 1 player, 5 players, 72 players, whatever. Target demographic. Who are you aiming the game at? Look at things like gender, age, maybe country, language, that kind of thing. Types of players, hardcore gamers, that kind of stuff. Target platform. What device would you like your product to come out on? PC, certain consoles, mobile, that kind of thing. Visuals. So this is like the mood topic that we talked about in the target in the initial planning document. Similarly for audio, music and pacing. Is it going to be a fast-paced game? Is it slow-paced? Does it change? Why does it change? Things like that. Make it very brief. Input type. How is the user going to control your game? Is it a controller, a keyboard, a mouse and keyboard, or some other mechanism, maybe gesture recognition through a connector, something along those lines? You tell me. And then we're going to get into the mechanics section. Now, every single mechanic of your game is going to fill out one of these tables. So add more tables as you need to. I have 3 here. You may need more. Right? So just copy and paste the table and insert one below it. Very simple. So for every mechanic, I want you to describe what the name of the mechanic is. Again, try and keep it 3 words or less. A description of what the mechanic is, a little bit more thorough. Maybe where we'll see it, that kind of thing. Who's doing the mechanic? Is it the player? Is it one of the NPCs? Is it the environment? When is it happening? Why is it happening? How will it happen? What you see up here in this description, you notice a lot of these things that say erase this text. Erase it. This is just for you so you know how to fill out each individual section. So from square bracket to square bracket, just get rid of it. You don't need it anymore. Okay, so once you know what you're doing, just get rid of it. In here I've given a number of different examples of classic game mechanics that we see nowadays. A cover mechanic you'd see in Gears of War, quick time events and like Shenmue and stuff like that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Real-time passing, day-night cycle, Ocarina of Time, projectile collision, cover mechanic, permadeath, all these types of things. Choose the mechanics that work best for you and come up with your own if you want. That's great. So there's the game mechanics. The player's goal and motivation. So here, tell me what the player's overall goal in the game is. So as the player, is your goal to like collect the most number of items in a game or something like that, or achieve a certain time frame in terms of beating level? In terms of the player's motivation, why are they playing the game? What keeps them going? So for example, I might have some people that play the game of Mario because they want to be able to get through the whole game without dying, or they just want to be able to get through the game. Some people play it because they're doing time trials and they want to beat the levels as fast as possible. Backstory. Give me a description of 1 paragraph backstory of the game and the player, the characters, and everything inside of that. What's going on? What is the story basically? Player characters and units. Just going through this, I'm not going to go through all these little individual pieces. You're basically going to discuss what kind of statistics are stored, skills and abilities each player and NPCs and units will have. Same thing with customizability. Will you be able to select a character? Can you customize that character? Will you be able to upgrade that character? That kind of stuff. Then we get into the non-player character section, non-player character units. These things are characters within the game that the player doesn't control but interacts with in some way. So it might be a shopkeeper in a RPG game, or it might be an enemy like a Goomba in Super Mario, something like that. So for each one of the NPCs in your game, again, you're going to create one of these tables. A lot of the data is here for you. Delete what you don't need or highlight, that kind of thing. If you need to add more tables, copy and paste and keep adding. So what is the NPC's name? What type of group are they in? Are they a unique NPC, like a shopkeeper that's specific? Or is it clonable, like there's 50 million Goombas in Super Mario Brothers, that kind of thing? Behavior, are they non-interactive, just wandering around on some kind of task? Maybe they're collecting wood or something like that. Or are they interactive? You can just talk over things with them. Or are they an enemy that you need to attack, or it's attacking you? Physical description. Describe what the NPC looks like, size, and supply a picture if you can, like do a quick little sketch or something along those lines. Just so, or it can just be a word description as long as it's clear. Track stats. So list all the track stats about that individual NPC. Health, location, what type of things they're holding. If they're a shopkeeper, what kind of inventory are they going to sell? That kind of stuff. Skills. List all the skills and abilities that an NPC has. It could be any number of things. It could be a specific type of firing mechanic or something like that if it's an enemy. Might be bartering for a shopkeeper. AI strategy. So what is going to govern that NPC with respect to the game itself? Are they wandering around following a specific path? Do they stand still and they just barter with you and haggle with you over certain items? Maybe they will sell it for this price, maybe they won't. Do they only come attack you when they see you using line of sight? That kind of thing. So for every NPC. Gameplay elements. Now this is a little bit different. So I'm just going to go back to the brief description over here because it's a little bit clear. Describe the elements of the game that can be interacted with. Now this may be like, if you're playing like an endless runner, that might be something as simple as like a pile of rocks that you have to jump over. You're interacting with it by dodging it. It could be any other thing. It could be weapons. It could be all sorts of different gameplay elements. Again, for every single one of these elements in the game, I need one of these tables. Add and remove tables as necessary. So they could be buffs, debuffs, spells, checkpoints that they get, save points, platforms that the player can jump on. Are they moving platforms? Are they stable platforms? Just enter in all the data as you see here. Game physics and statistics. What kind of physics are we going to see in the game? What kind of stats are going to be tracked? That's about it. Multiplayer. Alright, so if you're going to have multiplayer in your game, you're going to describe all the parts of it that make sense, so I have a good idea of how that multiplayer is going to play out. Just fill out the table, everything you see here, what type of multiplayer, players, what the roles of each player is, the breakdowns in terms of is it local, is it networked, that kind of stuff. Multiplayer versus solo. So describe what's the difference between the multiplayer component of your game and the solo experience of your game. Why do they exist separately? Should they exist separately? Game flow. Here you're going to talk to me about how the flow of an individual game plays out. So, for example, a single level. How is the player going to be playing? Timing, types of skills the player is going to use, abilities, mechanics that exist. What kind of difficulty are we looking at? That kind of stuff. A level-based game flow. So, for example, in Super Mario Bros. 1, you exit one level, you go directly into the next level, and it just goes in sequence unless you use a warp point. In Super Mario Bros. 3, that's vastly different. They have like an overall world map, and the player can choose between which level they go to next. They get options. And then we have open world exploration-based game flow, if that applies. So, the new Zelda or Skyrim or something like that. Are they completely free? What kind of quests are we looking at? Story quests, looted ability quests, side quests. Discuss these different pieces of information. User interface, a lot of different things. The screen flow, when we're talking about this, the screen flow is like, so what kind of screens and in what order is the user going to see? So are they going to see a menu first or a title screen, and then it's going to go to the gameplay screen, maybe the high score screen afterwards, and then back to the menu. Okay? How is the user going to interact with each one of these screens? So for example, in the main title screen, might say like press start to continue, that kind of thing. In a inventory screen, what can the user click on or what can the user interact with, that kind of stuff. So fill out the table accordingly for each screen. What's your HUD going to look like, your heads-up display? What kind of elements am I going to see? A life bar? Am I going to see a timer, scores, all that kind of thing? Where are things going to be laid out? So this might be a good place to again draw a little picture to help illustrate yourself. What are the controls in the game? So tell me, for every action in the game, what is the button sequence or individual button that's going to be needed and the scenario. So sometimes you might have context-based controls. So for example, in a soccer game, the A button might pass the ball if you have control of the ball. But if you don't have control of the ball, it might do like a slide tackle or something like that. So give me the scenario description, what button sequence and what action can occur. Game settings and options. What can I customize as a player in my game? Maybe that's character customization. Maybe that's other things like graphical type things like game resolution, volume control, difficulty, that kind of stuff. Art and video and the sound and music. These are kind of brother-sister elements here. You're going to be describing what I'm going to be looking at, what kind of mood it's going to put me in, what is the terrain like, that kind of stuff. Animation, I want to know what are all the animations in the game, which element is doing the animation, when does the animation get triggered, is it automatically happening, is it happening infinitely, of 1 or 2 cycles, what situation are we going to see that in. Cutscenes, are there going to be any cutscenes in your game? How are you going to do that? How long are they going to be? That kind of thing. Sound and music, basically the same thing as the art side, but this time for all the sound effects and the music, I want to know what sound effect is going to be there, that kind of stuff. I give some examples to discuss all these different sounds and where you might see them. Up here in the overall goals, just like the artwork, you have to have an overall mood for your sound, your music, and that kind of stuff. Like scary games would have eerie, slow music that's kind of very creepy, whereas Sonic the Hedgehog has very fast, high-energy music to keep you going and excited, depending on what you're doing. And again, just fill out the chart, add rows as you need to. Stretch goals. This is an interesting concept that many of you have probably not heard of before. So stretch goals are what we call like nice to haves. So they're not necessarily going to be in your game, but if you have time, your goal is to get them in there. So it'd be like somebody making a first-person shooter and say, we are definitely going to have 5 maps, but a stretch goal might be 8 maps, that kind of thing. Or it might be certain game mechanics, or it might be like a level creator for the player, modding tools. Those are stretch goals that aren't necessary for the initial release, but it's nice if we get it in there. So describe each of those and add more tables as necessary, again. So technical specification. This is where you might have to do a little research and digging. So in the technical specification, what we're talking about is what types of algorithms are you going to need to achieve certain goals in your game. So for example, if you have AI in your game and you want the AI to be chasing your player, that means you're going to need to know how to do pathfinding. Well, what are all the different ways you can achieve pathfinding? There's things like the A-star algorithm, which we see here, or Dijkstra's algorithm. There's a lot of different options. You might need to know how to do line of sight to achieve that same thing. If they're not going to chase you until they see you, how do you know if they see you? So these are classical algorithms. So for every concept within your game, what type of technical thing are you going to have to research in order to achieve that? Maybe it's collision detection. You might be looking up quad trees. You might figure out, well, how do I know if a point exists in like a vision cone? These are things that you're going to have to do research on. So I should see all these inside of here. Okay? And then where will I see it in the game itself? Project organization. This is basically a prioritized list of to-do items. Think of it like a big to-do list of every programming element in your game. Now I've got 12 rows on here. Add as necessary. More than likely you will need to add. I can't think of you needing to subtract 12 items. Subtract from 12. If you are, then you're not putting all the details in here. So for example, you might have like create menu system. You might have, you might have something like implement pathfinding. You might have something a little bit more, a little smaller, like set up sound system. These types of things. That is what I want to see in there. What I don't want to see is non-programming things like find pictures, find sound. That's not programming. That's research. I don't want to see like edit images. I want to know the individual programming aspects. And then give me a difficulty level of them. Prioritize them. And then reorganize your chart so priority 1 is at the top and they work their way down. Now when I say prioritize, I mean think of it like what things need to be done first. So for example, if you're making an endless runner, you can't play the game unless you can move the player. So that needs to be done before collision detection, for example. So collision detection would come as a lower priority than movement. So think of things like that. If you're in a team, or in a group, who is in charge of each element? So all of your game mechanics should show up in here. but there's going to be a lot of other elements as well. But every single item, programming item, needs to have an owner, and that owner is going to be evaluated based on what they're responsible for. And it should be divided up reasonably. I'm not saying an equal number. I'm saying equal challenge for every individual. So nobody should have one element, but you want to be fair. So if you have a really strong programmer, you may give them the more challenging tasks or more tasks, depending on how you want to break up that work. So think about that very clearly. The marking for the game design document, so that's all the elements, sorry, all 17, all the main 17 elements. The marking for this, for these first three phases, I've already shown you before, but the bulk of the mark is this phase, phase 1, right now, filling out that GDD. So that one phase alone, I think I wrote that down somewhere over here, that one phase alone is 27 out of the 40 marks. So filling out this chart the first time is 27 out of the 40 marks. Okay, we already saw 5 from phase 0, and then phase 1 is 27 out of the 40 marks. So do a really good job on your initial submission, and it's going to follow the same process as before. I'm going to make comments, I'm going to return it to you, you're going to make the changes, and then I'm going to take it back, I'm going to look at it again after you resubmit, of course, and I'm going to recommend more changes. And this process is going to continue until I give you a good to go message. Once I give you a good to go, then you're done. Now, when that process first starts, you're going to get your mark out of 27 on those individual pieces, or on your initial submission. Phase 2 is you fixing up your work. Okay? And I'm going to let you resubmit it a number of times until it's tolerable. But the first time you make the changes, that's where your marks are going to come in for phase 2. And that's worth a total of 8 marks out of the 40. And that really is just a matter of making all the recommended changes, submitting everything effectively with all the hard copies and whatnot. Once I've given you the go-ahead and I say good to go, your job is to then print out a hard copy version of your GDD, and that's going to be used in your final marking. So you need to print out a hard copy. That hard copy must have one of these project marking pages for each group member. So duplicate this as necessary at the back. So add more of these. So if you have 4 group members, I should see this page 4 times at the bottom of this document. Make sure every individual signs and dates and prints their name as well, once on the hard copy version, not on the soft copy obviously, but on the hard copy version. Okay, and that is it for the marking scheme for phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3 is a little bit more. We'll get into that in the next piece. That's everything, I believe. Just quickly go over. Make sure your deliverables for this phase 1 and 2. For phase 1, the completed GDD. Phase 2, the revised GDD, and repeat as necessary until we're happy. Once we're happy, that's when you're going to give me the hard copy with all of the marking schemes on the back, one for each group member. And then again, I have the evaluation shown here one more time, so you see it a number of times. So that's it for phase 1 and 2. One more video and one more phase.